Hello Shiny viewers, I am DS, your psychologist, and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. So in this episode, we are going to do a second MBTI and Tarot crossover, and we are going to feature the Queen of Swords, which corresponds to the INTJ. So there are a lot of systems that attempt to match MBTI to a tarot card. So the system that we are using is the most straightforward. So all the I something something J types, they are the queens. So definitely this does not mean that the I something something J types are all women. It's just that the INTJ is represented by the Queen of Swords. So let's look at what are the characteristics of the Queen of Swords. So in the tradition of our Tarot and MBTI crossover series, we are first going to look at the characteristics of the Queen of Swords and compare it with the INTJ. Do they resemble each other? So if you check the internet, the words that are used to describe the Queen of Swords include professional. So I think that you would agree that that is a good trait. So other positive traits about the Queen of Swords include career-oriented. So the Queen of Swords is also well-organized, witty and smart. So this really corresponds with the INTJ because I think that the INTJ does have high intelligence. It is true that the INTJ is usually witty, but their humor is really sarcastic and dark. So another positive characteristic of the Queen of Swords besides being intelligent is that she is very clear with her dealings. I think that is another way of saying that she is professional. So for the Queen of Swords, if you are a colleague, then you are a colleague. The line, the boundary is very clear.
And this is one of those times when you need to be very clear about what you say.
So in my personal experience with the INTJ, I think this is also quite descriptive of what the INTJ really is. So there are 16 court cards in Tarot. The Queen of Swords is just one of the court cards. However, a lot of Tarot readers will tell you that of all the 16 court cards, the Queen of Swords is usually one that is interpreted quite negatively. So let us look at the negative characteristics of the Queen of Swords. First, the Queen of Swords is very cynical. They do not trust easily. So I think this does describe the INTJ. A lot of the INTJs that I know of are really skeptical, especially when it comes to love. So the Queen of Swords is also a cold individual that does not form bonds easily. In fact, she puts a very high barrier between herself and others. So one of the characteristics of the Queen of Swords in Tarot is that she represents someone who appears to be often hurt in love. Many a times the Queen of Swords is synonymous with the bitter widow. So another characteristic of the Queen of Swords is that the Queen of Swords is a perfectionist and has really impractical high ideals. As such, the Queen of Swords is really very harsh on herself. Not only is she harsh on herself, she also imposes her perfectionist attitude to other people. So therefore, the Queen of Swords is not really welcome. So because of her perfectionism, she really scrutinizes her own work and that of others. So she is never pleased with herself. That is why the Queen of Swords look really bitter and unhappy. Now up to this point, I really think that there is a very high match between the INTJ and the Queen of Swords. The characteristics of the Queen of Swords does describe the INTJ well. Now, we go on to the second segment where we look at the symbolism behind the tarot card in the Queen of Swords and make a comparison between the Queen of Swords with the INTJ again. So as you can see over here, there are clouds in the background in this tarot card. The cloud represents mental challenges, and given that the Queen of Swords' head is actually above the clouds, this means that this Queen of Swords is able to overcome all mental challenges. She is strong enough to do so. And it is true, in real life, INTJs usually can rise above their mental challenges. Their mental challenges. So tarot can be really very interesting because of all the symbolism in each picture. So in the Queen of Swords, we can see that she is actually holding a sword in her right hand. This sword represents clarity. So the Queen of Swords is really clear what she wants and how to get it. She is a strategist. So as you can see in this card, the Queen of Swords left hand is extended. So what does this symbolize? This symbolizes that the Queen of Swords will be able to offer you very clear, sound advice if you actually asked her. And this is very INTJ. So the Queen of Swords may have a very fierce, cold, unapproachable look, but if you can actually go forward and ask her a question, she will offer you some advice if she finds that your question is logical and not stupid. This is very similar to the INTJ. Okay, now I have all the queens in front of me. This is the Queen of Wands, Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Cups, and the Queen of Swords. So you see, of all the queens, the Queen of Swords is the only queen that is actually facing the right. So in psychology and in tarot, the right is future-oriented. So the INTJ is the individual that is the most future-oriented amongst all the queens.
Baby, love me right, let me love you till you get it right.
So the real-life INTJ is also very future-oriented. This is because extroverted sensing SE is their inferior function. So since the INTJ has SE as their inferior function, they appear to be living in their own world or bubble because they are not in the now. So many tarot readers will also describe the Queen of Swords as the bitchy queen. So some would say that she is a gossip monger. So I can really understand where this is coming from. The Queen of Swords is somebody who has been hurt in life before. So she's bitter about life and sometimes she's sour about other people enjoying themselves. But this itself has little resemblance with the INTJ. So it is not uncommon for an INTJ to feel sad or depressed. However, it is rather rare for an INTJ to lash it out on others. So some other readers may call the Queen of Swords a gossiper. However, this totally will not describe the INTJ because the INTJ does not like to gossip. So as I went through the list of characteristics of the Queen of Swords from the internet, I did not find the word gossiper or gossip monger. So it is very likely that subsequently a lot of tarot readers gave the Queen of Swords this label because of how she looks in the Rider-Waite.
Oh my god.
So our third segment of every episode of this crossover series is to make a comparison between the Queen of Swords of another tarot deck with the INTJ. So as a personal preference, I have chosen the Black Cat Tarot, and here you can see this is the Black Cat Tarot's Queen of Swords. Interestingly, she is now facing the left, and the left represents the past. So what does this mean? So personally, I think that the Black Cat's deck is a very interesting deck because the black color really represents our own shadow. So while the Queen of Swords appear to be very future oriented, her shadow is actually always lingering in the past. This may sound a little bit philosophical or deep. I am not too sure for the INTJs whether this is really true. So if you do know of an INTJ very well, or if you are an INTJ yourself, can you tell me whether this is true? Although you are future oriented, you're always disturbed or thinking about past. You let the past haunt you. So the Queen of Swords in the Black Cat's deck does look very sad. And this feeling of sadness is amplified from the falling leaves that you can see in the middle of the card. Anyway, because the falling leaves has a very close resemblance with autumn maple leaves, so whenever the Queen of Swords has been picked, it is going to represent autumn if a person is asking for time. Anyway, that is a sidetrack. Back to our main theme, the Queen of Swords. So the Queen of Swords is sad. However, if you look closely, she puts on a very strong false front. So this is consistent with the original image of the Queen of Swords. She puts on a very high wall between herself and the world outside. Poor Queen of Swords, she needs to be loved, but she is the one who is pushing everyone away. So in conclusion, do I think that there is a high resemblance between the INTJ and the Queen of Swords? My verdict is that the resemblance is as high as 95%. High, isn't it? So personally, the characteristics that I have described earlier in the first segment of this video, they do really describe the INTJ very well. So as a tarot reader, I understand that many other tarot readers like to call the Queen of Swords the Peachy Queen. However, because I am also trained in MBTI, so I see the Queen of Swords slightly differently from many other tarot readers. So this means that for me, I do not see the Queen of Swords in such negative light. In fact, I can find the Queen of Swords quite endearing because I am the King of Swords. So in tarot, the life partner of the Queen of Swords is the King of Swords, and incidentally, the King of Swords is the ENTJ. So in real life, I also think that the ENTJ and the INTJ are very compatible for one another. So personally, as a tarot reader, whenever I get the Queen of Swords, I sometimes also tend to consider whether the person in question is autistic or suffering from Asperger's syndrome. So why is this so? Personally, as a psychologist, I have met a few people who are diagnosed either as autistic or having Asperger's syndrome. So I have managed to type them, and they are usually either INTJs or ISTJ. So I really like this MBTI and Tarot crossover series because on the one hand, it can really help MBTI learners to have an additional layer as an insight into the world of the INTJ. On the other hand, it can also give people who are actually well versed in tarot another dimension to consider when looking at a court card. If you have enjoyed this video, do remember to like and comment. And if you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more videos like this one. Okay, I am going to sign off now and I look forward to see you in our next episode. Goodbye!